Hey guys, today's story is a little different. Picture this, a sleek art gallery in downtown Chicago, all glass and soft lighting, buzzing with the kind of crowd that sips overpriced wine and whispers about genius like it's currency. I was 38, standing in a black dress I'd saved for months to buy, my heart pounding as my painting's years of my soul on canvas hung on those walls for the first time. My name's Elise Harper, a painter who clawed her way out of a small-town diner job to chase the stream. That night was supposed to be my arrival, the moment I'd prove I wasn't just some nobody with a brush. But beneath the clinking glasses and fake smiles, I felt a cold prickle, like a blade. My business partner, Nathan, the man I'd trusted with everything, was about to gut me. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. Drop a comment, where are you watching from, and have you ever had someone stab you in the back? Now sit back, let the room go quiet, and let me tell you how it really went down. The gallery opening was my pinnacle, or so I thought. For years, I'd poured everything into my work, every late night, every skipped meal, every doubt I shoved down. Nathan was the polished half of our duo, the one who knew how to charm investors and talk up my art like it was his own. We'd built this gallery together, or so I believed, scraping by on grants and loans, his connections, and my talent. That night, the room glowed with promise. My paintings, vivid abstracts that felt like confessions, drew gasps and murmurs. I caught glimpses of Nathan across the room, his tailored suit catching the light as he worked the crowd. But something was off. His laughter was too sharp, his glances too fleeting. I told myself it was nerves. I was wrong. Halfway through the evening, I slipped into the back office to catch my breath. The air was cooler there, the hum of the crowd muffled. My hands trembled as I adjusted my earrings, trying to shake the unease. That's when I saw it, a contract on Nathan's desk, half hidden under a stack of invoices. My name was on it, but the terms weren't ours. It was a deal to sell my entire collection, every piece I'd ever painted, to a private collector for a sum that made my stomach lurch. The catch? My signature was forged, and Nathan's name was listed as the sole beneficiary. My work, my life, was being stolen right under my nose. I stood there, the paper shaking in my hands, as the truth sank in like ice. He wasn't just my partner. He was a thief. The betrayal hit like a physical blow, a fist to the chest that stole my breath. I wanted to scream, to storm out and tear the contract in his face. But I didn't. I set the paper down, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the gallery. The crowd was still buzzing, oblivious. Nathan was holding court near my favorite painting, a swirling red piece I'd called Surrender. He caught my eye and smiled, all teeth and charm. I smiled back, my lips tight, my mind already turning. He thought he'd played me. He thought I'd stay quiet, too stunned to fight. But I'd spent my life scraping by, learning how to survive. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I spent the rest of the night playing the part, shaking hands, thanking collectors, letting the wineglass in my hand grow warm. Inside, I was unraveling. Every laugh from Nathan felt like a taunt, every compliment on my work a reminder of what he planned to take. I kept seeing that contract in my mind, the forged loops of my name. How long had he been planning this? How many nights had I trusted him while he sharpened the knife? The questions burned, but I swallowed them. I had to be smarter than him, colder. As the last guests trickled out, I stood alone in the gallery, the lights dimming. My paintings stared back at me, silent witnesses. I touched the frame of Surrender, its edges rough under my fingers. Not yet, I whispered. Not to the painting, but to myself. The quiet of that moment was my first taste of power. I wasn't the girl from the diner anymore, too scared to speak up. I was Elise Harper, and I'd built this dream with my own hands. Nathan thought he could take it because I was soft, because I trusted too much. But trust is a blade you can turn back on the one who wields it. As I locked the gallery door, the city's pulse humming outside, I made a vow. I'd take everything: his reputation, his empire, his pride. He'd built his castle on my back, but I'd be the one to burn it down. Revenge isn't loud. It's patient. And I was just getting started. The gallery's afterglow faded fast, replaced by a cold, gnawing clarity. I didn't sleep that night. My Chicago apartment, a cramped walk-up with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, felt like a cage. The contract's words burned in my mind: me forged signature, Nathan's name claiming it all. I sat at my kitchen table, a single bulb flickering overhead, and stared at the city's skyline through a smudged window. I could have confronted him, let my rage spill out in a glorious, reckless mess. But that's what he expected: a woman too emotional to think straight. Instead, I chose silence. Silence was my weapon, and I'd wield it like a blade. I needed to know how deep his betrayal ran, and that meant digging without him suspecting a thing. By dawn, my coffee was cold, and I had a plan. I'd unravel his lies, piece by piece, and let him think he was still winning. The next morning, I walked into the gallery like nothing had changed. Nathan was there, all easy smiles, sipping an espresso and scrolling through his phone. "Big night, Elise," he said, not looking up. "You're the talk of the town." His voice was smooth, but I caught the edgy flicker of smugness. I forced a smile, my stomach twisting, and busied myself with paperwork. My hands moved on autopilot, filing invoices, but my eyes were sharp. I watched him. Every call he took, every glance at his laptop, every time he stepped out for a quick meeting. He thought I was oblivious, but I was memorizing his patterns, mapping the cracks in his facade. That afternoon, I found my first thread to pull. Nathan left for lunch, his office door ajar. I slipped inside, my pulse hammering. His desk was a mess of contracts, receipts, and gallery schedules, but I knew what I was after. His laptop was locked, but a sticky note on his monitor caught my eye: login credentials for the gallery's cloud account, scrawled in his careless handwriting. Idiot. I logged in, my fingers trembling, and found a folder labeled Private Deals. Inside were emails, dozens of them, between Nathan and a collector named Victor Grayson. They detailed the sale of my collection, with timelines stretching back 6 months. 6 months. He'd been planning this while I painted, while I trusted him, while I called him my friend. Each email was a stab, but one line hit hardest: "Elise won't notice until it's done. She's too focused on her art." I printed the emails, tucked them into my bag, and logged out before he returned. The weight of those emails sat heavy in my chest, but I didn't break. I couldn't. Back at my apartment, I spread them across my table, piecing together his scheme. Nathan wasn't just selling my work, he was erasing me. The contract gave him full rights to my portfolio, past and future, leaving me with nothing but a footnote in his success story. The rage came then, hot and blinding, threatening to swallow me. I wanted to burn his world down right then, smash his office, expose him to the art world. But I stopped myself. Rage was a luxury I couldn't afford. I paced my apartment, the floorboards groaning, and forced my breathing to slow. Revenge wasn't a scream, it was a whisper, deliberate and patient. I'd make him pay, but only when I had everything I needed. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own life. At the gallery, I played the part: cheerful, distracted, the emotional artist Nathan thought I was. Behind that mask, I was relentless. I tracked his meetings, noting names and times. I charmed his assistant, Mia, over coffee, coaxing bits of gossip about his big deals. She didn't know the half of it, but her chatter gave me leads. I cross-referenced names from the emails with gallery records, building a map of his network. Victor Grayson, the collector, was the key: a reclusive millionaire with a reputation for buying art cheap and flipping it for millions. Nathan was his middleman, and I was the pawn. The deeper I dug, the more I saw how calculated it was. Nathan hadn't just betrayed me, he'd weaponized my trust. The emotional toll was brutal. Every night, alone in my apartment, I wrestled with doubt. Was I becoming the villain? Obsessing, scheming, lying to everyone around me? I'd catch my reflection in the window, eyes hollow, jaw tight, and wonder if I was losing myself. But then I'd look at my paintings, stacked against the... They deserved better than Nathan's greed. I deserved better. One night, I sat cross-legged on my floor, a half-empty wineglass beside me, and traced the edges of a canvas. The texture grounded me, reminded me who I was. I wasn't fighting for revenge alone, I was fighting for Elise Harper, the woman who'd clawed her way here. By the end of that week, I had enough. Names, dates, deals, evidence that could bury Nathan if I played it right. I stood in my apartment, the city's hum filtering through the walls, and felt a shift. The rage was still there, but it was sharper now, honed into purpose. Nathan thought he'd broken me, but he'd only woken me up. He was building his empire on my back, but I'd make sure it crumbled. And when it did, I'd be the one standing tall. Trust is a fragile thing, but so is a liar's throne. The city's pulse thrummed outside my window, but inside my apartment, time slowed. I'd gathered enough evidence to expose Nathan, mails, contracts, a web of lies that could unravel him. But exposure wasn't enough. I wanted to take everything, his reputation, his deals, his pride, and leave him with nothing but the echo of his own greed. That meant building a plan, one so precise it could cut like a scalpel. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by notes and coffee mugs, the air heavy with the weight of what I was becoming. I wasn't just Elise Harper, the painter, anymore. I was a strategist, a shadow moving in the dark. The thought thrilled me, but it also scared me. Was I crossing a line I couldn't uncross? I pushed the doubt down and got to work. My first step was to protect my art. Nathan's contract gave him rights to my entire portfolio, but it was built on a "For Jeremy" signature, scrawled by his hand. I needed to nullify it without tipping him off. I contacted a lawyer, Sarah Klein, a sharp-eyed woman I'd met at an art fundraiser. Over coffee in a bustling Loop cafe, I slid her a copy of the contract, keeping my voice low. "This wasn't me," I said, tapping the signature. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she scanned the page. "If you can prove it's forged, you've got a case," she said. "But you'll need more than this." I nodded, my mind already racing. I spent the next few days gathering old contracts, emails, anything with my real signature. I sent them to a handwriting analyst Sarah recommended, paying the fee with money I'd saved for rent. The analyst's report came back clear, the signature was a fake. I had my shield. But defense wasn't enough. I needed to strike. Nathan's empire rested on his reputation. Galleries, collectors, and critics all trusted his word. If I could erode that trust, his deals would collapse. I started small, planting seeds. At the gallery, I overheard Nathan bragging about a new exhibition, a solo show for a rising star he'd discovered. I reached out to the artist, a nervous kid named Leo, through a burner email. "Heard Nathan's representing you," I wrote. "Ask him about the Grayson deal." I didn't say more, but I knew Leo would dig. A week later, Mia, Nathan's assistant, mentioned Leo had pulled out of the show, spooked by contract issues. Nathan's irritation was palpable, and I hid my smile. One crack in his foundation. The bigger blow required risk. Victor Grayson, the collector, was Nathan's golden ticket. If I could turn him away, Nathan's scheme would implode. I spent nights researching Grayson, his tastes, his habits, his ego. He was a man who craved exclusivity, the thrill of owning what others couldn't. I crafted a letter, anonymous but precise, hinting that Nathan was overhyping my collection to inflate its value. "Check the provenance," I wrote. "You're not getting what you think." I mailed it to Grayson's office, my heart pounding as I dropped it in the box. If Nathan caught wind of this, I'd be exposed. But the risk felt alive, like paint hitting a blank canvas. The moral weight of my actions hit me hardest at night. I'd lie awake, the city's hum filtering through my walls, and question myself. Was I becoming like Nathan, deceptive, calculating? I'd built my life on honesty, on art that bared my soul. Now I was weaving lies, manipulating people I didn't even know. One evening, I stood in my apartment, staring at a half-finished painting, a storm of blues and grays I hadn't touched since the betrayal. I picked up a brush, dipped it in crimson, and slashed a line across the canvas. The act was violent, freeing. I wasn't him. I was fighting for what was mine, and if that meant playing dirty, so be it. The plan grew sharper each day. I mapped Nathan's upcoming events, galas, auctions, meetings with critics. I'd hit him where it hurt most, his image. I contacted a local art blogger, someone known for sniffing out scandals, and fed her anonymized tips about shady gallery deals. I didn't name Nathan, not yet. Let him sweat. At the gallery, I kept my mask in place, laughing at his jokes, nodding at his plans. He didn't suspect a thing. That was my quiet power, the tension of knowing I was steps ahead while he strutted like a king. One afternoon, I stood in the gallery, surrounded by my paintings. The light caught Surrender, its reds glowing like embers. I touched the frame, my fingers steady. Nathan thought he'd won, but he'd underestimated me. I wasn't just taking back my art, I was rewriting the story. He'd built his castle on my trust, but I was laying the dynamite. When it blew, he'd have nothing left to stand on. A house of cards falls fastest when you pull the right one. The gallery hummed with its usual rhythm, but I was a storm beneath the surface. My plan was in motion, seeds planted, threads pulled, and Nathan's empire starting to wobble. I'd protected my art with the forged contract's exposure, turned one of his artists against him, and sent a warning to Victor Grayson. Now it was time to strike harder, to chip away at the pedestal he'd built on lies. Chicago's art scene was small, incestuous, and brutal. One whisper could spread like wildfire. I'd make sure those whispers were about Nathan. But I had to be careful. One misstep, and he'd see me coming. I moved like a ghost, my every action calculated, my face a mask of calm. Inside, I was electric, alive with the thrill of dismantling him. My first move was at a charity auction, a glitzy event in a River North ballroom where Nathan played the golden boy. He was there, schmoozing collectors, his laugh cutting through the clink of champagne glasses. I wore a simple black dress, understated but sharp, blending into the crowd. My target wasn't Nathan but the people around him, critics, gallery owners, the gatekeepers of his reputation. I'd spent days crafting a dossier, anonymized but damning, screenshots of his emails, timelines of his deals, hints of forged contracts. I printed copies, slipped them into plain envelopes, and handed them to a courier I'd hired for cash. As the auction began, the courier worked the room, dropping envelopes into gift bags and coat pockets. By the time Nathan took the stage to bid on a sculpture, the whispers had started. I watched from the back, my pulse steady, as heads turned and eyes narrowed. He didn't notice, but I did. A critic slipped a paper into her purse, her lips tight. A gallery owner frowned, scanning the room. The seeds were sprouting. The fallout came faster than I expected. The next day, Mia, Nathan's assistant, was frazzled, fielding calls about rumors and concerns. Nathan stormed into the gallery, his tie loose, his voice clipped as he barked at her to handle it. I kept my head down, sorting invoices, but my ears were sharp. A major critic had pulled out of his next panel, citing scheduling conflicts. 2 collectors canceled meetings. Nathan's charm was cracking, and I felt a quiet thrill, like the first brushstroke on a blank canvas. But I wasn't done. I needed to hit him where it hurt most, his wallet. Victor Grayson was still in play, and I knew he was Nathan's endgame. If I could sever that tie, his whole scheme would collapse. I dug deeper into Grayson, using public records and art world gossip to map his moves. He was in town for a private viewing at a rival gallery, a perfect chance to nudge him further. I crafted another letter, this time bolder, signed as a concerned artist. It detailed Nathan's pattern overhyping artists, forging documents, skimming profits. I included just enough specifics to sting, not enough to trace back to me. I mailed it to Grayson's hotel, my hand steady as I sealed the envelope. The risk was high if Nathan caught wind, he'd know someone was targeting him. But I was past fear. I was in control, and that control felt like power, raw and unshakable. The emotional cost was another story. At night, alone in my apartment, the weight of my actions pressed down. I'd always been the honest one, the artist who poured truth onto canvas. Now I was lying, manipulating, playing a game I barely recognized. I stood in front of my paintings, their colors muted in the dim light, and wondered if I was losing myself. One night, I pulled Surrender from the stack and set it on my easel. Its reds and gold stared back, defiant. I traced the brushstrokes, remembering the woman who'd painted its cared but unbroken. "This is for you," I whispered. Not to Nathan, but to her. I wasn't fighting to destroy, I was fighting to reclaim. That realization steadied me, pushed the doubt back. Back at the gallery, I kept up the act smiling, deferring to Nathan, letting him think he was still king. But the cracks were spreading. A local art blog posted a vague piece about shady dealers, and I saw Nathan's jaw tighten as he read it. He started watching me, his glances sharper, like he sensed something but couldn't place it. I met his eyes once, my expression soft, and he looked away. That was my moment of quiet power, the tension of knowing I was outmaneuvering him. He thought he was untouchable, but I was pulling the strings. By the end of the week, the art world was buzzing. Nathan's name wasn't in the open not yet, but the whispers were loud enough. Collectors hesitated, critics distanced themselves, and Grayson's office stopped returning his calls. I stood in the gallery one evening, the lights low, my paintings glowing on the walls. Nathan was gone, chasing a meeting that wouldn't happen. I touched the frame of Surrender, its edges rough under my fingers. His empire was crumbling, and I was the one holding the hammer. The higher you climb on someone else's back, the harder you fall when they stand up. The air in Chicago crackled with autumn's edge, but inside me, a fire burned. Nathan's empire was teetering, collectors pulling back, critics whispering, Victor Grayson ghosting his calls. I'd chipped away at his foundation, but now it was time to bring it down. His big moment was coming, a high-profile gala at the Art Institute, where he'd unveil a new acquisition and cement his status as the art world's darling. It was his peak, his throne. I'd make it his ruin. The plan was set, every detail polished like a blade, but the weight of it pressed on me. This wasn't just strategy anymore, it was personal. I was about to face him, to look into the eyes of the man who'd tried to erase me, and I had to stay steady. One slip, and I'd lose everything. The gala was a spectacle, chandeliers glinting, champagne flowing, the city's elite draped in silk and ego. I wore a deep green dress, simple but striking, my hair pulled back to show the steel in my eyes. Nathan was at the center of it all, his suit impeccable, his smile a weapon. He didn't see me at first, too busy charming a circle of collectors. I moved through the crowd, my heart a metronome, carrying a slim folder tucked inside my clutch. Inside were copies of the forged contract, the analyst's report proving it fake, and a timeline of Nathan's deals with Grayson. I'd spent days crafting a single page, a concise exposé that could fit in a pocket but hit like a sledgehammer. My courier from the auction was back, slipping copies to key players, critics, gallery owners, and, most importantly, Grayson's assistant, who I'd learned was attending. As Nathan took the stage to announce his acquisition, a rare sculpture he'd hyped for weeks, I felt the room shift. The whispers from my envelopes were spreading, heads turning, glances darting. He started his speech, all charisma and polish, but I saw the sweat on his brow. He knew something was off. I stood near the back, my face neutral, my pulse a steady drum. Then it happened. Grayson's assistant approached a prominent critic, whispering, showing her the page. The critic's eyes widened, and she passed it to another. The ripple grew, a quiet wave cutting through Nathan's words. He faltered mid-sentence, his gaze scanning the room. Our eyes met. For a split second, I let him see men at the Elise he thought he knew, but the one who'd outplayed him. His smile twitched, and I turned away. The emotional shift came fast. As I slipped into a side hall to catch my breath, doubt clawed at me. I'd spent weeks building to this, but watching Nathan unravel felt heavier than I'd expected. Not because I pitted him didn't deserve that, but because I saw the cost of my own transformation. I'd become someone who could orchestrate a takedown, who could wield lies as deftly as he did. My hand shook as I leaned against the wall, the folder still in my clutch. I thought of my paintings, of surrender, its reds like a heartbeat. This wasn't about becoming him, it was about surviving him. I straightened, my resolve hardening. I'd come too far to falter now. Back in the main hall, the gala was unraveling. Grayson's assistant confronted Nathan privately, their voices low but sharp. I didn't need to hear the words to know what was happening. Grayson was out. The critic who'd seen my exposé was on her phone, likely texting her editor. Nathan's acquisition announcement landed flat, the applause thin. He left the stage quickly, his face a mask of control, but I saw the cracks. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. My work was done. The art world was small, and by morning, his name would be toxic. I slipped out of the gala, the night air cool against my skin, and felt a quiet power settle in my chest. I'd turned his triumph into ash without saying a word. The next day, the gallery was chaos. Nathan was there, pacing, shouting into his phone as deals fell apart. I walked in, my expression calm, and he froze. "Elise," he started, his voice tight. I didn't respond, just set a copy of the forged contract on his desk. "You should have read the fine print," I said, my voice low, steady. He stared at it, then at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I walked out, leaving him with the wreckage. The gala had been his stage, but I'd rewritten the script. A liar's crown is only as strong as the trust he steals. The fallout from the gala was swift, a wildfire I'd sparked but didn't need to tend. Nathan's name was poison. Now collectors backed out, critics churned out scathing posts, and Victor Grayson publicly cut ties, calling Nathan's deals questionable. The art world, so quick to crown its kings, was merciless in tearing them down. I'd dismantled his empire, but my work wasn't done. I had to reclaim what was mine. Me paintings, my legacy, my name. The gallery, once our shared dream, was now a battlefield, and I was ready to claim the final victory. But as I stood on the edge of it, a quiet ache settled in. This wasn't just about winning, it was about rebuilding who I was after the war. My first move was legal. Armed with the handwriting analyst's report and Sarah Klein's expertise, I filed to nullify the forged contract. We met in her office, a sleek space overlooking the loop, where she laid out the plan. "The forgery's clear," she said, sliding the analyst's report across her desk. "We'll demand the return of your portfolio and sue for damages." I nodded, my jaw tight. The process was fast. Nathan's reputation was already in tatters, and his lawyers didn't fight hard. Within days, a judge ruled in my favor, restoring full rights to my work. I walked out of the courthouse into Chicago's gray drizzle, my breath catching. My paintings were mine again, but the victory felt hollow. I'd fought so hard to reclaim them, yet the betrayal still clung to me like damp clothes. Next, I went for the gallery itself. Nathan had leveraged our joint ownership to fund his schemes, but his financial house was collapsing. I'd saved every penny I could, and with a small loan from a friend, I made an offer to buy him out. He didn't have a choice. Creditors were circling, and the gallery was bleeding money. We met in his office, the same desk where I'd found the contract that started it all. He looked smaller now, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. "You planned this," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I didn't flinch. "You planned to take everything from me," I replied, my tone ice. He signed the papers, his hand shaking, and I walked away with the keys. The gallery was mine, but standing in its empty silence, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I'd won, but at what cost? The emotional shift came that night in my apartment. I sat on the floor, surrounded by my paintings. Surrender leaned against the wall, its reds glowing in the lamplight. I traced its edges, my fingers trembling. I'd become someone new, strategic, ruthless, unbreakable. But I missed the Elise who painted without fear, who trusted too much. Tears came, hot and sudden, and I let them fall. Not for Nathan, but for the parts of me I'd buried to survive him. In that quiet moment, I made a choice. I'd reclaim myself, too, not just my art. I'd paint again, not for revenge, but for me. The final step was public. I reopened the gallery under my name, hosting a solo exhibition of my work. The art world, ever hungry for a comeback, showed up. Critics who'd shunned Nathan praised my resilience, collectors who'd hesitated now bid fiercely. I stood in the center of it, my black dress swapped for deep blue, my smile real for the first time in months. The crowd moved around me, but I felt alone in the best way, whole, grounded. My paintings hung on the walls, no longer pawns in someone else's game. Nathan was gone, his name a footnote, his empire dust. I didn't need to see him to know he'd lost everything. As the exhibition ended, I locked the gallery and stepped into the Chicago night. The city's lights shimmered, alive with possibility. I'd taken back my art, my name, my future. The fight had changed me, sharpened me, but it hadn't broken me. I was still Elise Harper, the woman who'd clawed her way from a diner to this moment. Nathan thought he could bury me, but I'd risen stronger. The deepest betrayals forge the fiercest souls. The city's hum faded as I walked home, my steps slow, deliberate. The weight of the past months settled into something softer, like a canvas ready for new colors. I'd fought for my art, my name, and won, but the real victory was internal. I wasn't the same Elise who'd stood in that gallery a year ago, wide-eyed and trusting. I was sharper, wiser, a woman who'd learned to wield her own power. The betrayal had cracked me open, but in the mending, I'd found strength I didn't know I had. My apartment welcomed me with its familiar creaks, my paintings stacked against the walls like old friends. I lit a candle, its flicker dancing across surrender, and sat in the quiet. No rage, no schemes, just peace, hard-earned and mine. I'd paint again tomorrow, not to prove anything, but because it was who I was. Nathan's betrayal had tried to define me, but I'd rewritten the story. The canvas was mine now, and I'd fill it with light. Justice wasn't loud, it was this moment, calm and whole, where I stood taller than ever.